From KLCC Studios, this is Oregon on the Record.
I'm Michael Dunn. The isolation of COVID saw an increase in overall pet ownership across the U.S. and in Oregon. For many, welcoming a new cat or dog or other pet was a huge boost for mental health. And one group in particular sought out four-legged companionship in great numbers. According to the National Poll on Healthy Aging, 10% of all people between the ages of 50 and 80 got a new pet sometime between 2020 and 2021. It's a good trend, as many studies suggest that a pet can greatly increase the quality of life for seniors. The only downside? For many, their pets may outlive them. Today on Oregon on the Record, you'll hear from experts about how to make sure your pets are cared for both short-term emergencies and also for the longer term if you're no longer around or able to care for your pets. Just like preparing a will and testament, estate planning for your pets is a real thing and an increasingly important step in life's journey. Today on the show, you'll hear from both the Greenhill and Oregon Coast Humane Societies about the growing trend of pet estate planning. Making a plan for your pets, whether it's just in case of an emergency like last month's ice storm, or for a more permanent plan after one passes away, it's a big deal when pets are considered a vital part of our family. First, let's hear from Greenhill Humane Society. Kerry Lieberman, the Executive Director for Greenhill Humane Society. Really appreciate you coming in and talking to us.
Sure. Glad to be here.
Yeah, boy, obviously we suffered a terrible ice storm a few weeks ago. I kind of wanted to talk to you about what you've seen in terms of perhaps lost pets that are being recovered, or perhaps people who lost power and had major damage and they were looking for a place to temporarily house their pets. Kind of what have you seen?
Yes, this ice storm was certainly unique. In many cases, it was a shelter-in-place situation because people couldn't move.
Yeah.
They couldn't move in the ice. They did lose power, but it was hard to leave their homes. So we didn't actually see a lot of stray animals coming in, but we did help and assist with a number of situations where people had to evacuate their homes and needed a place for their pets.
Yeah.
The Red Cross shelters that were set up in this area all offered pet care as well, and Greenhill Humane Society supported that with resources and supplies so that people could safely shelter with their pets.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting, and you and I have spoken before, and obviously, winter creates problems on its own. But of course, in the summertime and wildfires, that's almost an entire season where you could have issues. And I kind of wanted to sort of get your general read on, weather type crises most likely are going to increase. And I think, from your perspective as the leader, in terms of planning for how to both temporarily and maybe even permanently house pets, kind of what do you see today and perhaps into the future, and how it's going to impact what you do?
Right. These sorts of events are something that we need to prepare for. Mm-hmm. And everyone is talking about preparedness, and we're hoping that people keep in mind their pets as well. What that means is developing relationships with boarding facilities, mm-hmm. If possible, arranging and having those conversations with neighbors, as well as friends and family outside of the areas, so that they have a plan in place for their pets.
Yeah.
From an infrastructure standpoint and a community standpoint, what that means is that the boarding facilities in each of our communities are becoming more active. They're developing the need for wider response, and animal shelters are doing the same.
Yeah, yeah. Let me reintroduce you. We're talking with Kerry Lieberman. He is the Executive Director for Greenhill Humane Society. So let's turn to the issue sort of longer-term care. We're sort of in this interesting nexus in that, obviously many studies suggest that as we age, getting a pet is a wonderful thing. Mm-hmm. It's so important in terms of combating loneliness or just overall mental health, which is great. But obviously, as we get older, it creates a whole new set of challenges having a pet, such as a dog or a cat, that might outlive us. Maybe talk a little bit about that issue and kind of advice and counsel you might have.
Sure, absolutely. Having a pet has been proven to increase our longevity, actually. Mm-hmm. So we always encourage people to get pets at whatever age. And it's important to plan for their future. And Green Hill Humane Society and most of the larger shelters in our communities have programs in place that make arrangements with people to care for their pets in the event that they can no longer care for them. And at Green Hill, we call it securing your pet's future.
Okay.
It is, as most humane societies do, it's a conversation with the pet parent, the pet owner, an understanding about what the animal situation is, how old the animal is, what kind of care it's been given, and what the wishes are for that pet should a person pass away. And it may be something as easy as temporarily holding the pet until a relative can come.
Okay.
Or something more long-term where the pet actually gets surrendered to the shelter and then goes up for adoption.
Wow. So it almost sounds like, I think many of us, when we reach a certain age, we're often talking about making a will or something where we're going to leave various assets to family members. It sounds like you can include that with regard to pets.
So yes, actually in Oregon, you can set up a trust for your pet as well, and many do. I'm not an attorney, so I won't speak further on that topic, but I would encourage people, if they're interested, to speak with an estate planning attorney. It's very much a thoughtful thing that should be put into place so that you don't have to worry about it at the end. And with the program that Green Hill has, we actually commit to contacting people on at least an annual basis to check in, see how they're going, and to see if there's any changes in the number of pets that they have or the health, and make that transition as smooth as possible for everyone.
So it sounds like Green Hill can sometimes act as sort of I can't think of the right word, but a temporary facility, so that if someone does pass away and they've made arrangements, a dog or cat can go to Green Hill until relatives can, or the person identified in the estate planning can then take possession.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Fascinating. Yeah. Maybe give us some general guidance of somebody who's in their 70s or 80s and has a pet, thinking about either before they get a pet, what are some of those challenges they may have to overcome, or maybe there's assistance they can be looking for that can help them still have the pet, but provide it with the care it needs.
Right. Mobility is certainly probably the primary concern, and so I would discourage people from getting kittens or puppies, just because they get underfoot and create a hazard. But other considerations beyond that would be one's own ability to care for the pet. So weight might be an issue, weight of the pet. Can you lift a dog into a car to take it for vet care? But also the support that you have around. There are certainly many businesses and individuals who are pet sitters. There's doggy daycares, there's boarding facilities, there are mobile veterinarians. So most of the situations could be overcome as long as an individual has the resources to do that and pursues that.
Sure. I mean, you could almost say it's almost like we're in sort of a bit of a golden age with pets, because there are a lot of resources. I realize sometimes people can't avail themselves of that, but certainly your organization and others, I mean, there's a lot of support for people who have pets in various stages of their lives as well as their pets' lives.
Absolutely. The shelters like Green Hill Humane Society, the other shelters within Oregon are all more of the safety net. So it's for people who don't have the resources. But beyond that, there is a wealth of businesses that are there to help support people with pets. It's a huge industry.
Yeah. Carrie, my last question for you is kind of just an overall statement of, there are challenges, as we saw with like the ice storm or preparing for if your pet may outlive you. But just generally speaking, and you're certainly one who would be in the know, just talk about the overall just improvement in quality of life if you have a pet.
Oh, absolutely. I could go on forever about this topic. But yeah, having a pet in one's life is a connection that I often say makes us more human, interestingly, because it's an animal, a creature, a sentient being in our lives that we can care for, that cares back for us.
Maybe doesn't judge us like others, maybe?
Yeah, it doesn't judge us, but also sometimes lets us know when, are we out of line? Yeah. Sometimes I get that look from my cat.
I get that too.
and so, yeah, it keeps us going for many. And I would say certainly I've talked to a lot of people since, the last handful of years have been really challenging. And sometimes that pet being there in that room when you're isolated from other people is the one thing that keeps you going. Gets you up. If it's a dog, you got to get up and walk and be outside and breathe fresh air. And if it's a cat, you get those snuggles and the purrs, and even the fish.
And even the fish, even the fish. Well, Carrie Lieberman, the executive director for Green Hill Humane Society, really appreciate you coming in and talking to us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Now we're going to hear from the Humane Society that serves much of the Oregon coast. Elizabeth Thompson, the executive director for the Oregon Coast Humane Society, thanks so much for coming on and talking with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you've got an event coming up that you're putting on that I think is kind of interesting. This idea of pet planning and almost like estate planning for your pets. Talk about it.
So here at Oregon Coast Humane Society, we created a program last year called A Plan for My Pets. And this is so that pet owners have a chance to make plans in the event they're no longer able to care for their animal.
Okay.
And so what we've offered is that with a gift of any size from their estate, from their will, their trust, piece of property, whatever, we will bring their animals in and then we'll find homes for their animals. And the important part about it is that it gives us the information about each pet before they arrive. And so, especially as we've come out of the pandemic, we've seen so many people that have had some sort of medical emergency, life crisis, where suddenly they are, not with their animals anymore. And then the animals arrive here. And if we can get that information about their behavior, their medical, their dietary needs before they get here, it means that their transition to the next home is a lot easier on the animal.
Okay. And I imagine there might be sort of two tracks here. It might be that somebody who knows they have a health problem or that they may outlive their pets. They may have a family member who they want to take care of this animal. Is your organization, could it be as kind of a way station to make sure that, if a person does pass away, their pet has a place to go waiting for that relative? And then it sounds like, you're there in case they don't necessarily have a plan B for a person to take care of the pet, and then you're going to go ahead and try and find a suitable home for that pet.
Right. So we see both of those examples here at the shelter pretty frequently. Last year we had a Rottweiler come in whose owner had died unexpectedly, a young owner.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the man was in his 20s. And of course, you never expect that's going to happen. And so the family was in Idaho. His father wanted to come and get the dog, but we were the holding place where the dog was able to stay safely until the father could get here. And you see with a family going through that type of a loss, especially unexpected and someone young,
Sure.
You never expect you're going to lose your child. It's just devastating for the family. And so when they know that, hey, the animal can sit here as long as you need, we're not going to give the animal away, we're going to honor the family's wishes. I think that's really a peace of mind so they can focus on the more immediate steps that need to be taken when that type of a loss happens.
Sure.
Then on the other side of that, we have all the time where people adopt from us and will say, well, what's your plan if the animal outlives you, or if your life circumstances change? And a lot of times people say, oh, my child, my spouse, they're going to take the animal. And we find time and again that life happens, and even the best of intentions, people that want to take their father's cat or their sister's dog, something has changed in their own life and they're no longer able to do that. And so, whether we're going to be the permanent holding facility that's going to bring the animal in, get them vetted, and then get them into their next adopted home, or we're just going to be the temporary stop. Either way, we want to make sure we serve the animal. And nowadays you see everybody's pet has some kind of allergy. They're on some kind of medication. They have something behavior, and which is a testament to the good care that pet owners are providing.
Sure.
The fact that we know our animals are allergic to grain, or they need to be on, this pain relieving pill, whatever it is. Um, and when they wind up at the shelter and you don't have that information, it's like solving a mystery. And in the meantime, we're doing all kinds of diagnostic testing, you're running blood, you're getting x-rays, you're doing all these things. In the meantime, the animal's suffering. Like they've lost their meds that they should be on. And sometimes it takes a while to figure that stuff out, especially now where it's hard to get into a vet office with any kind of speed. So the more preparation people can make ahead of time, the better. And best case scenario, that never has to be used. You never need to tap into that toolbox of information that we have about someone's pet, because they stay with the pet for the entire life of the animal. But when it doesn't end up like that, it's really nice to be able to kind of shorten the learning curve for each animal.
Sure, sure. Let me reintroduce you. We're talking with Elizabeth Thompson. She is the executive director for the Oregon Coast Humane Society. And we're talking about what to do with pets, maybe if we can't care for them forever, obviously. It's interesting, as I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking, boy, the role and the tasks that a humane society is really expanded over the intervening decades. I mean, perhaps years ago it was just that. It was someone finds a dog or a cat that's a stray and brings it to the Humane Society. You're doing a lot more than just that these days. Isn't that the case?
It's really been a culture shift, and this is nationwide, and it's a beautiful part of sheltering that really we're all working to keep families with their animals. So especially as we just went through this huge pandemic. So many people lost their job, or they worked remotely, they went and got an animal, and then they have to go back to work. And there's so many times people call and I've got to surrender this dog. They're just not trained. They need this and that. And anytime we can provide a resource that keeps the dog in the home, that's all the better for the animal and for the person who loves the animal. But yeah, it's really I always say, oh, we serve both ends of the leash, because at the end of the day, people are better with pets. Your life is longer and it's richer, and everything we can do to make that people stay with the animal they love, the better for everybody. And it's such a joy to serve in that way, to not just look at it. This is not the dog pound of the 70s. Like that is not what you see across the country anymore. And it's such a beautiful transition for the organizations that are trying to help animals and the people who love them.
Well, and to that point, and you brought up the pandemic, I imagine as much of a shock, and none of us want to necessarily look back on that time. However, I imagine, like you just described a bit, there were some lessons learned during the pandemic about owners and pets that perhaps you're applying today.
Really, it has shifted how everything is done. We saw so many people that got an animal because they were at home, and these animals were just the center of their world. I mean, this was kind of their lifeline when they were, stuck in their house without much access to anything social or other people or animals of any type. And so then as we came out of it, we saw there was a lack of access to veterinary services. So all these people that got animals then couldn't get them fixed, end up with all these accidental litters of puppies and kittens. And so there's just been this boom of animals nationwide, and shelters, we're in all kinds of collaborations with other shelters, mainly in Oregon. We try to work with our neighboring shelters, but the trend across the country is that the shelters are overwhelmed. All shelters are overwhelmed with animals, cats and dogs. Large dogs are taking a lot longer to find homes for, and they're having a lot more behavior issues because people could not socialize the animal. And so when you have a puppy, it's really important that you get them out early and often. They're meeting different people. They're learning about the vacuum cleaner. They're learning that the lawnmower is not scary. They can get in an elevator. They can go upstairs. And so we're seeing all these animals arrive here with just a really lack of social skills, and through no fault of the owner. It's just that they didn't have access to that. Yeah.
It's interesting, as I was reading the materials about your upcoming event, you're having an attorney there to help people. And I guess that's kind of an interesting part of this is to make sure that, it's not just, hey, hoping for someone to be able to take care of an animal in case I might pass away. It's really getting everything written down and making sure that it's a document that will survive you, much like a will.
Absolutely, because like it says in the event information, you can't leave money to your animals, and so it's important that if people are doing their trust planning or writing their will, doing their estate, that they make things very clear what they want to have happen with their animals.
Yeah.
We got two little senior dogs in here a couple of weeks ago, and those dogs actually came in. That woman that adopted them had a stroke. So she's still alive, but she's no longer in her home. She's in assisted living. She had put the two dogs into her trust, and whoever took the dogs was going to get money when they took her animals. And the dogs ended up going to one of her friends, and the woman had the two dogs for less than a month and brought them here to us. And this is a great example of how you have the best laid plans, and then the plans, something has shifted. So the woman that had been given these two dogs brought them to us because she said, I just can't handle them. She just gotten her own dog. So she now has three dogs in the house. And so she ends up bringing us these two dogs. Well, finally, and we have all the paperwork about their adoption. They had been adopted in July. They came from a local rescue here in Oregon. So we're trying to kind of track that down. So we end up contacting the woman, the original owner's sister. And she had no idea that the friend who'd gotten the dogs had brought the dogs to us. So it was just another good example of there's no guarantees. And, what a gift that she provided funding for those dogs.
Well, Elizabeth Thompson, the executive director for the Oregon Coast Humane Society, really appreciate you coming on and talking with us and giving us this very important information.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Absolutely.
That's our show for today. Making a will can be hard because, let's face it, it means planning for your ultimate demise. But, like anything in life, if you don't make a plan, you only create misery later on. And as our population ages, and so many of us simultaneously have pets in our lives, it only makes sense to plan for their lives without us. I want to thank Carrie Lieberman of Green Hill Humane Society and Elizabeth Thompson of the Oregon Coast Humane Society for talking with us. This show, along with all episodes of Oregon on the Record, is available at klcc.org. I'm Michael Dunn, and this has been Oregon on the Record from KLCC. Thanks for listening.